There is a saying of Jesus that, at first hearing, sounds sad yet contains a profound truth that resonates to this day. No prophet is honored in his own hometown. This teaching is not just about the difficulties of holy figures, but it is also a gentle whisper about ourselves, about the way we often perceive things that are all too familiar. Was it because they were too familiar with the image of Jesus as the carpenter's son that people inadvertently closed their souls to his teachings, which were full of wisdom and truth? They saw him through the eyes of memory, of worn-out prejudices, forgetting that every person is a mystery, always growing and changing. That teaching is like a reminder for us to learn to see our loved ones with eyes that are always clear and fresh. Do not let familiarity obscure true values. Do not hastily judge a person's future and the great things they can do simply because you know their origins. Truth and sacred values sometimes do not come from distant, noble places, but are present in the closest, most ordinary things. We only need to open our hearts and overcome the shell of prejudice to realize the miracle. As someone once beautifully said, those who rush to judge based on appearances rarely see the essence of things. The teaching of Jesus, no prophet is honored in his own hometown, is not just a fleeting lament, but like an endless stream of philosophy flowing through ages to illuminate the hidden corners of the human soul. It is a restless yearning about the relationship between the familiar and the sacred, between memory and truth, between prejudice and faith. From that one statement, we can contemplate countless deeper truths, lessons that transcend the space of the ancient village of Nazareth, to touch the heart of each of us today. Before we begin, we kindly invite you to take a moment to subscribe to our channel to help spread this valuable content to your family and friends. We thank you, and now, we invite you to listen. 1. Familiarity is a veil that obscures greatness. We often fail to recognize the extraordinary value of what is too close to us. The light of a torch is brightest in the dark night but fades under the sun. Similarly, a person's greatness is easily hidden by everyday details, by habits we are too used to seeing in them. One afternoon, while walking with his apostles past an old vineyard on the outskirts of Capernaum, Jesus stopped. The apostle Andrew asked, "Teacher, this vineyard looks so barren, why do you stop?" Jesus smiled, pointed to an old gnarled grapevine and said, "Do you see this vine? The owner passes by it every day and only sees that it is old and ugly. But he does not see that from these roots sunk deep into the earth, the sweetest grapes were born last season." People often cherish sweet fruit from afar, forgetting the miracle that is silently happening right under their feet. 2. People are often imprisoned by the past of others. Our minds tend to frame a person within our first memories of them. We look at them and see only the shepherd boy of yesteryear, the girl washing clothes by the river, not the person they have striven to become. Breaking that box of prejudice requires an openness that not everyone possesses. After being rejected at the synagogue in Nazareth, Peter walked beside Jesus, his heart full of resentment. Why could they say, "Is this not the son of Joseph the carpenter? Did they not hear the wisdom in your teaching?" Jesus quietly replied, "Peter, when a potter makes a precious vase, he must break the old clay mold. But the villagers only remember the image of the muddy lump of clay, not the vase that has taken shape. They want me to remain the lump of clay in their memory because it makes them feel safe." 3. Envy arises from similarity. It is difficult to accept that someone with the same starting point, who grew up with you, can reach a different stature. Their extraordinariness inadvertently becomes a mirror reflecting our own ordinariness. And sometimes, instead of admiring, people choose to deny it to soothe their own hearts. A woman in the crowd at Nazareth said loudly, "He said those words? I know his whole family. We grew up by the same stream. How can he be better than us?" Jesus heard, turned to the crowd and said, "Two seeds were sown in the same plot of land. One seed reached for the sun, its roots digging deep for water, and became a great tree. The other seed only grew tall enough not to be overshadowed. Seeing the great tree instead of wondering how to grow taller, the other seed blamed the ground for being biased. 4. True value is often recognized by outsiders. Strangers are not bound by prejudices or memories. They perceive a person based on what they demonstrate in the present, their words, actions, and aura. Therefore, they have an objective view and can easily recognize the values that familiar people inadvertently miss. The Apostle John asked Jesus when they came to another city and were warmly welcomed by the people, "Teacher, it is strange. The people here have never met you, yet they open their hearts to believe. But the people of Nazareth drove you away." Jesus replied, "John, a gem found by a foreign merchant will be valued at its true worth. But if it lies in a farmer's yard, to him it may just be a stone to hold down papers." 5. Truth is often uncomfortable, especially when it comes from someone you think you know well. We more easily accept teachings from a strange master than from a friend or a neighbor. This is because we can easily deny their authority, thinking, "I know exactly what kind of person he is." Familiarity becomes an excuse to reject a truth that could change ourselves. At a well, a man who was a childhood playmate of Jesus said to him, "Jesus, you speak of the kingdom of heaven, of truth. But I remember you once fell while climbing that fig tree. What is there to believe in your words?" Jesus looked him in the eye and said gently, "Yes, I once fell. But because I know the pain of falling, I have learned to appreciate the straight path. You only remember the fall, but you do not see the path I am showing everyone." 6. The shadow of expectations from loved ones. People who know us well often impose their own expectations on us. They want us to be a good carpenter, a successor to the family business, not a prophet. When we step off the path they have laid out, we will meet with resistance, not because they hate us, but because we have shattered the familiar image they have built. A relative of Jesus came to him and said, "Jesus, go home. Your mother is worried. Continue your father's work. It is a peaceful life." Jesus replied, "A boat is built to cross the ocean, not to lie idle in the shipyard. The greatest peace is in fulfilling one's mission, even if it means facing stormy seas." 7. People look but do not see. Looking is the action of the eyes, recording a physical image, but seeing is the action of the soul, comprehending the essence, value, and potential within. The people of Nazareth looked at Jesus, the carpenter, but they did not see the Messiah. When a blind child was healed by Jesus, the boy exclaimed, "I can see! I see the light! I see your face!" The apostles were astonished. Jesus turned to them and said, "The entire town of Nazareth has seeing eyes, yet they did not see what this child just saw with his whole soul." Sometimes one must lose ordinary sight to learn how to truly see. 8. Humble origins are seen as lacking authority. The world often equates authority with noble birth and worldly power. They do not believe that supreme wisdom can come from a small village, from an ordinary working-class family. They look for a king in a palace, not a prophet in a workshop. A Pharisee present at the Nazareth synagogue sneered, "The word of God spoken from the mouth of a Galilean? Can anything good come from Nazareth?" Jesus replied, "Do you search for diamonds in the palaces of kings, or do you find them in the deep layers of rock? The value of truth lies not in where it is proclaimed, but in the truth itself." 9. Believing in the familiar is the greatest test of faith. It is easy to believe in a miracle from a distant place, but to believe in a miracle present in the person you meet every day is a true test of faith. It requires us to rise above common reason and old experiences to touch the mystery. The Apostle Thomas, the doubter, confided in Jesus, "Teacher, Sometimes I also find it hard to believe. I know you. I have eaten at the same table and slept under the same roof as you. How can I reconcile the image of a close teacher with the power of the Son of God?" Jesus placed a hand on his shoulder. "Thomas, do not try to reconcile. Let both images coexist. For the love of God is not something distant in the heavens, but something so close that it can eat and sleep with you. To realize that is faith." 10. Growth requires stepping out of the comfort zone. Jesus' saying also implies a law of growth. Sometimes, to be recognized, to realize one's full potential, a person must leave their familiar home and venture into a new environment where they are judged by their abilities, not by the label of so-and-so's child. When the apostles were preparing to be sent out to preach, they were anxious. Jesus reassured them, "Do not be afraid to go to foreign lands. Like a seed, if it stays forever in the familiar granary, it will only be a seed. It must be sown in new soil, be tilled for it to sprout and bear fruit. Go and let the world see the harvest that the Father in heaven has sown in your hearts." Before we continue with today's journey of discovery, we would greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to leave a comment and share your feelings. If you found this content valuable, please don't forget to hit the share button to spread these positive vibes to your friends and family. And now, let's get back to the program. 11. The naked truth hurts the pride of old knowledge. People are often proud of what they know, and that knowledge creates a safe world. A new truth, especially from someone familiar, is like a stone thrown into the still pond of their knowledge. It forces them to admit that what they know is not enough, and this wounds their pride. A master craftsman in the village who had taught Jesus his first few cuts with a saw listened to him preach and shook his head. "What is this boy saying? I've known him since he was covered in sawdust. Wood must be carved with the grain. That is the truth. Does he now intend to teach me other truths?" Jesus overheard and said to him, "Respected craftsman, you taught me about the grain of wood, and for that I am grateful. But my Father in heaven has taught me about the grain of the human soul. Each type of wood requires a different handling, and each soul needs a different word of healing." 12. People fear the change that others might bring to their own lives. When a familiar person becomes extraordinary, it changes not only that person, but also challenges the entire community to change. Their teachings may demand renunciation, conversion, a reevaluation of one's entire way of life. The fear of changing oneself is greater than the admiration for them. On a slope, a man stopped Jesus. "Jesus, if what you say is true, does that mean my whole life of business has been wrong? Do you want me to throw it all away?" Jesus looked at him with eyes full of compassion. "I do not want you to throw away your possessions. I only want you not to let your possessions throw away your soul. A boat can be filled with goods, but if you load too much, it will sink." 13. A prophet is a mirror, and not everyone wants to look at themselves in it. The word of a prophet has the power of a mirror that reflects the soul. It reveals what is good, but also exposes the hidden corners, the things people want to hide. When faced with an unpleasant truth about themselves, the easiest reaction is to break the mirror or turn away from it. A woman known for her piety in the village felt uncomfortable hearing Jesus preach about humility. She whispered to the person next to her, "Who is he referring to?" Jesus turned towards her and said loudly for all to hear, "When the sun shines into a room, it does not intend to condemn the darkness. It is simply light. The one who loves truth will open the window to clean the room, while the one who loves darkness will find a way to cover the window." 14. The love of one's hometown can sometimes be possessive. The love of familiar people can become an invisible chain. They love the old you, the version that is within their understanding and control. "You are our carpenter. You are our villager." They find it hard to accept that you belong to a greater mission, to the whole world. Mary, his mother, watched her son from a distance, her eyes heavy with worry. A neighbor said to her, "The boy has gone too far, Mary." Later, when alone with his disciples, Jesus said, "A small stream that flows around a village is loved by the villagers, but when it decides to flow into the great sea, becoming part of the vast ocean, the grassy banks of the village feel a sense of loss." 15. Knowledge about a person is often the enemy of understanding them. People often confuse knowing about a person with understanding a person. The people of Nazareth knew everything about Jesus, his parents, his brothers, his profession. It was this wealth of information that prevented them from understanding his message and his divine nature. They were satisfied with the shell they knew, so they no longer felt the need to explore the core within. A learned scribe blocked Jesus' path. "I know all about you. Your father is Joseph, of the tribe of David, the lineage of Judah." He recited the genealogy flawlessly. Jesus listened patiently and then asked, "Sir, you can name all the parts of an oil lamp. But without fire, does that knowledge help you see in the dark? Do not just study the lamp, seek the flame." 16. Greatness requires distance for admiration. To see the majesty of a mountain, one must stand at a certain distance. If you stand too close, you only see rocks, plants, and trails. Likewise, to perceive the stature of a person, the mind sometimes needs a distance from prejudices and everyday details. The apostle Jude Thaddeus asked Jesus as they climbed a hill overlooking the small village, "Why does everything look so peaceful from here, teacher?" Jesus replied, "Because from this distance you no longer see the dividing fences, the muddy roads, or the dilapidated roofs. You see the whole picture. The soul is the same. To see God's plan, we sometimes have to step back from our own petty worries." 17. The old always resists the new to preserve itself. Any system, from a small community to a major religion, tends to be self-preserving. A prophet who brings a new message, a new perspective, is seen as a threat to the established order. The resistance does not necessarily come from malice, but from the survival instinct of the old. When the chief priests questioned Jesus' authority, he told them a short parable. "No one puts new wine into old wineskins. If they do, the new wine will burst the skins, the wine will run out, and the wineskins will be ruined. No, they pour new wine into new wineskins," an old priest mumbled, "but the old wine is better." Jesus looked at him. "Yes, but it no longer makes one drunk with the wine of the kingdom of heaven." 18. People more easily believe in distant miracles than in nearby mysteries. A story about a healer in Egypt or Persia might make people marvel, but to believe that the neighbor they saw yesterday carving a chair can heal diseases today is almost impossible. The mystery is too close, too ordinary, so it loses its sacredness. A Roman centurion came to Jesus asking for healing for his servant. After the servant was healed, the apostles whispered about the officer's faith. Jesus said to them, "This man believes in me because he does not know me. He only knows of power. But in my hometown, people know me too well, so there is no room for power to intervene. They have filled their minds with the image of a carpenter." 19. Prophecy demands transformation, while familiarity brings a sense of stability. To follow a prophet is to embark on an adventure of the soul, a journey full of uncertainty and change. In contrast, clinging to what is familiar, even if it is not perfect, brings a sense of security and stability. Most people choose stability over transformation. An old friend met Jesus by the lake and said, "Jesus, you've changed. I remember we used to have fun skipping stones on this lake. That life was so simple. Why don't you come back?" Jesus picked up a stone and said, "Skipping a stone only creates temporary ripples, but I have come to tell you how to become the water which flows endlessly." 20. Truth belongs to no place, so it cannot be confined by place. The people of Nazareth thought that Jesus was theirs, and therefore his wisdom must also be limited within the framework of the village. But truth is like the wind. It blows everywhere and belongs to no one. Trying to imprison it in one locality is a futile effort. When the evening wind blew strong on the Sea of Galilee, Jesus said to his disciples who were struggling to row, "You can tell which mountain this wind comes from, but can you command it to blow only on our boat?" The word of God is the same. It comes from eternity, and it will go to the ends of the earth. No village can keep it for itself. 21. The community's perception creates a role they want you to play. Every community silently assigns roles to its members. You are the blacksmith. She is the vegetable seller. He is the elder. When a person decides to live differently from the role that has been imposed, the whole community feels confused and tries to pull that person back into their old role. They are used to that play. A relative said to Jesus, "You should get married, have children, and become a respectable man in Nazareth like your father." Jesus replied, "Everyone is born with a role written by the Father in heaven. I am just trying to read my script correctly. Do not ask me to read the script that this world has written for me." 22. Human weakness makes it hard to accept divinity in another person. To acknowledge divinity in their neighbor, people must first confront their own limitations and weaknesses. This is very difficult. It is much easier to pull the other person down to your level by focusing only on their most human, everyday aspects. A man shouted from the crowd, "You also eat, sleep, and get tired like us. How dare you say you come from God?" Jesus calmly replied, "It is because I eat, sleep, and get tired like you that I can show you the way to overcome that fatigue. God does not come as a distant king. He comes as a fellow traveler." 23. People respect the result but disregard the process. The villagers of Nazareth had witnessed the entire process of Jesus growing up. His first steps, his stumbles, his apprenticeship. They were so familiar with the process that they could not acknowledge the extraordinary result that he was in the present. They only saw the seed and could not believe it could become a great tree. Jesus pointed to an olive tree laden with fruit and said to the apostle Matthew, "People come here and marvel at these plump olives, but no one remembers the small, ugly seed that was sown in the ground, that had to decay for this tree to grow. They in Nazareth saw the seed, so they do not believe in the harvest." 24. What is given for free is often not cherished. The wisdom and teachings of Jesus were given freely to the people of Nazareth without requiring them to travel far or pay a price. Humans have a strange tendency to doubt the value of things they obtain too easily. They think that precious things must be hard-won. Seeing some people leave without listening to the sermon, Philip said to Jesus, "Teacher, perhaps you should not give your words to them so easily." Jesus replied, "Water from a spring flows for everyone, Philip. The thirsty will bend down to drink. The one who is not thirsty will step over it and look for expensive wine. I am the spring of water. I cannot stop flowing just because someone does not feel thirsty." 25. A prophet shatters the comfortable equilibrium of ignorance. Sometimes living in ignorance is a comfortable state. The prophet's word forces people to think, to confront the big questions about life, sin, and salvation. Many would rather live a simple life without bothering with such things, and they get angry with the one who has disturbed their false peace. A man grumbled, "Before you came, we lived very peacefully. We went to the synagogue, offered sacrifices, and did our business. Now you come talking about sin, about the kingdom of heaven, and mess everything up." Jesus looked at him. A shepherd is fast asleep while a wolf is prowling around his flock. Would he be angry with the one who wakes him up, or would he thank him? 26. Others' memories limit your own potential. The people in your hometown carry a fixed image of you. When you try to rise above it, that image acts as an invisible string pulling you back. You can't do it. That's not you. Their doubt can plant seeds of self-doubt in the prophet's own soul. When Jesus felt a deep sadness after leaving Nazareth, John came and stood silently by his side. Jesus said, "John, do you know the feeling of an eagle raised in a chicken coop? It knows its wings were made to soar in the sky, but all the chickens around it tell it that its wings are only for keeping balance while scratching the dirt." 27. Truth requires a prepared soul to receive it. The word of a prophet is like a seed. No matter how good it is, if it is sown on the rocky ground of prejudice or on the hardened path of self-satisfaction, it cannot sprout. The people of Nazareth had not prepared their souls to receive such a great truth. Jesus taught his disciples the parable of the sower and explained further, "I sowed the best seeds in Nazareth where I grew up, but the soil there was hardened by the ruts of familiarity. I must go and find other soils, souls that still long to be tilled." 28. Power that is rejected cannot manifest itself. A miracle is not a magic show, but an interaction between the power of God and human faith. Where there is no faith, power is locked, not because it disappears, but because there is no door open to receive it. The apostles wondered why Jesus did not perform many miracles in Nazareth. He replied, "The sun always shines, but if a person stays in a house with all the doors and windows shut, they will never see the light. It is not the sun's fault. I cannot heal those who do not believe they can be healed." 29. People often measure others by their own standards. Those with small souls and worldly ambitions cannot understand a person with great aspirations who lives for a sacred mission. They will use their own yardstick, money, fame, family, to measure the prophet. And when they find that the prophet does not fit any of their criteria, they will conclude that he is a madman or a fraud. A wealthy merchant in Nazareth said, "If Jesus is truly wise, why doesn't he use that wisdom to become rich? He is still empty-handed." Hearing this, Jesus said to his followers, "A fish cannot use the measure of the sea to gauge the height of a mountain. And a person who only knows worldly wealth cannot understand the riches of the kingdom of heaven." 30. Rejection in the hometown is an affirmation of a universal mission. The very fact of being rejected in a small, familiar place is a powerful sign that the prophet's message is not intended for just one village or one people. It is an invitation to all of humanity. That rejection, though painful, is the very force that pushes the prophet out into the wider world to fulfill his universal mission. After all, in a private prayer to the Father in heaven, Jesus said, "Father, they did not receive me. But in that rejection, I understand that my home is not Nazareth. My home is wherever there is a soul seeking you. My mission is not to be honored where I was born, but to bring your light to places still in darkness." Before we continue with today's journey of discovery, we would greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to leave a comment and share your feelings. If you found this content valuable, please don't forget to hit the share button to spread these positive vibes to your friends and family. And now, let's get back to the program. 31. People want to own the story of their origins. Every community has a common story they tell themselves. They feel comfortable and safe in that story. A prophet, by his very existence, writes a new chapter they did not expect. They reject him because they want to be the sole authors of their hometown story. An elder in the village who chronicled the history of Nazareth said to Jesus, "In our scrolls there are records of carpenters, of farmers. That is our story. Your story does not belong here." Jesus replied, "Sir, you record the stories of small streams. I have come to speak of the ocean that created all those streams. Do not let the story of the stream make you forget the ocean." 32. A community always has a common ceiling of potential. People living together tacitly create a common limit on what can be achieved. It is an invisible ceiling of expectation. A prophet is one who has broken through that ceiling. His existence proves that the ceiling is just an illusion, and this makes those accustomed to living under it feel insecure and threatened. Jesus watched some children playing. They had built a small tent out of branches and palm leaves and were crawling inside. He said to the apostle Andrew, "Look, they are happy in the little house they made for themselves. Adults are the same. They build a small world with familiar limits and find happiness in it. I have come to tell them that the sky is their true roof, but they are afraid of that vast expanse." 33. Truth is like bitter medicine. People would rather blame the one who brings it than drink it. The prophet's message is often medicine for the soul, but it usually has the bitter taste of repentance and change. The natural human reaction is to attack the one who brings the medicine, assuming they have malicious intent rather than courageously drinking the medicine to be healed. A man shouted at Jesus, "You have come here to judge us." Jesus replied, "I have not come to judge." When a doctor tells you that you have an illness, is he judging you or trying to save you? Do not be angry with the mirror because it shows a smudge on your face. Thank it and go wash your face. 34. Grace that requires no repayment is often suspected by those accustomed to living by merit. The world operates on the principle of you reap what you sow. But the prophet's word speaks of grace, of love given freely. For those in his hometown who knew he had no special merit, this gift of grace seems like a deception. They do not believe in anything free. Jesus saw a potter trying to mend a cracked pot. He said, "Let me help you." The potter waved him away. "Thank you, but this is my job." Later, Jesus said to his disciples, "The love of God is like a river, always wanting to fill empty jars, but many people try to make their own water. They do not believe that there is a source of life given freely." 35. The prophet reveals the cracks in the community's foundation. A community that appears stable is often built on hidden truths, silent compromises, and familiar hypocrisies. The prophet's words are like a small earthquake. They shake the foundations and expose the cracks. People drive him away for fear that the whole house will collapse. While dining at a Pharisee's house, Jesus remained silent during the host's boasting. Finally, he said only, "Your foundation is beautiful, but there is a termite gnawing at it from below." The host was angered, but Jesus continued, "I say this not so that your house will fall, but so that you can repair it before it is too late." 36. The silence of indifference is heavier than insult. Sometimes the cruelest rejection is not an angry shout, but the terrifying silence of indifference. When an entire community agrees to treat your words as nothing more than the passing wind, it is a complete denial of your existence and value. After Jesus finished preaching in the Nazareth synagogue, not many were angry. They simply walked away quietly, returning to their daily routines. Peter said, "They didn't even bother to argue." Jesus replied, "A stone thrown at me I can feel, but a wall of silence is colder and heavier. It does not oppose you. It simply does not acknowledge your existence." 37. People only accept wisdom that fits their framework. Everyone has a box of perception. They are willing to accept new ideas as long as those ideas can fit neatly into their box. The prophet's wisdom is too great. It cannot be contained in any box. Instead of breaking their boxes, people choose to discard the wisdom. A wise man in the village told Jesus, "Your words are very good, but they do not conform to the law of Moses." Jesus replied, "You are trying to use a cup to measure the water of an entire lake. Do not try to make the lake smaller. Realize that you need a larger container." 38. The prophet speaks a language of the future to people who live only in the past. The prophet's message is always directed towards a kingdom to come, a future transformation. But the people of his hometown are bound to the language of the past, of memories and traditions. They cannot understand someone who speaks of things that have not yet happened. Jesus spoke of eternal life. An old man in the village sneered, "I only know that my father died and his father died. That is all I know." Jesus looked at the old man. "You only see the leaves falling in autumn and do not believe that spring will come and bring new buds. I have come to speak of the spring of the soul." 39. They reject the divine possibility because they are too familiar with the worldly reality. They knew the reality of Jesus. He knew hunger, thirst, and fatigue. They clung so tightly to that worldly reality that there was no room for the possibility that he could also be the Son of God. To them, these two things were contradictory and could not coexist. The Apostle Thomas asked, "How can the villagers see you carving a table one moment and believe you can build the kingdom of heaven the next?" Jesus answered, "They think a hand can only do one of the two. They do not understand that by carving a table perfectly, the carpenter is also revealing the creativity of God." 40. Love without respect is just pity. The people of Nazareth might still have loved Jesus as a fellow countryman, a relative, but it was a love devoid of respect. They looked at him with the eyes of an adult looking at a child with fanciful ideas. That love became condescension, not recognition. A cousin of Jesus told Mary, "Advise him to stop. We love him. We don't want him to get into trouble." Jesus overheard and later said to his disciples, "People are willing to give a lost sheep a warm shelter, but they will drive away a lion for fear of its power. I did not come to be pitied like a sheep. I came to proclaim the truth like the Lion of the tribe of Judah." 41. Physical proximity creates spiritual distance. Paradoxically, being too close to someone in space and time can create a vast spiritual distance. The physical presence becomes so ordinary that people no longer perceive the divine presence. Jesus said, "A traveler in the desert who sees a burning bush will kneel, knowing it is a sign from God. But a person who lives next to that bush every day and sees it burn will just run for water to put it out. They only see the fire, not the mystery." 42. The prophet forces people to take responsibility for their faith. Believing in a teacher from afar does not require much responsibility, but believing in your own neighbor is a deeply personal decision. It forces you to face the ridicule of others and to defend that choice yourself. Rejection is sometimes just a way of evading responsibility. A man said, "If I believe you, the whole village will laugh at me." Jesus replied, "So you fear the laughter of men more than losing the truth that can set you free. The gate to the kingdom of heaven is narrow. You cannot pass through it with a crowd and their fears." 43. They want a miracle on demand, not a truth to follow. People often come to a prophet with the desire to witness wonders, like an audience at a show. They want power to serve their curiosity. But a prophet does not come to perform miracles on demand. He comes to bring a truth that requires obedience and transformation. The crowd in Nazareth challenged, "Do here what you did in Capernaum." Jesus replied, "A doctor heals those who admit they are sick. A builder builds a house for those who want a home. I cannot bestow faith on those who only want to test the power of God." 44. Rejection is an inevitable part of truth in an imperfect world. If a truth were easily accepted by everyone, it probably wouldn't be profound enough to challenge the status quo. Rejection and opposition are proof that the prophet's word has weight, the ability to discern and cause upheaval. The disciples were sad because of the hatred they encountered. Jesus comforted them, "If the world loved you, you would belong to the world. A boat that goes downstream meets no resistance, but it will be swept away. Only a boat that goes upstream to reach the source must face the current. Do not be afraid of the current. 45. The prophet loves their true selves while they love the shadow of themselves. The prophet's word calls people to step out of the shadow of self-satisfaction, sin, and prejudice to become the true person God desires them to be. But many people love their familiar shadow more. They reject the prophet because he wants to take away the shadow they have grown attached to. Jesus said, "A person accustomed to living in a dark cave will find the sunlight uncomfortable. Not because the light is bad, but because his eyes are not used to it. I am the light, and I know that at first the light will be painful for eyes accustomed to darkness." 46. They measure the words by the speaker's reputation, instead of measuring the speaker by the truth in their words. The world tends to believe a person because they have a title, a degree, a family background. They use the external label to judge the internal message. But the kingdom of heaven is the opposite. A true word can come from the mouth of a fisherman, and that word itself will give credibility to the fisherman. The scribes asked, "By what authority do you do these things?" Jesus answered them with a question about the authority of John the Baptist. He later told his disciples, "Do not seek authority from men, speak the truth. At first people will ask you by what authority you speak, but gradually the truth itself will become your authority." 47. The prophet's change exposes the stagnation of those who stay behind. The growth and transformation of a person is like a flowing river. Those who stay behind in the hometown are like the rocks on the bank. The stronger the prophet's flow, the more it highlights the stillness and stagnation of the rocks. Their discomfort comes from realizing they have not changed at all. Jesus said, "When I was a child, I played with them. When I was a young man, I worked with them. Now I bring them the living word, but they still want me to go back to playing and working as before. They want the river to stop flowing and become a familiar, stagnant pond." 48. They hear with their ears but do not listen with their hearts. There is a big difference between hearing and listening. Hearing is a physical act of the eardrum. Listening is an act of the soul, an opening of the heart to understand and be transformed. The people of Nazareth heard every word Jesus said, but they did not listen. Jesus ended a sermon with the words, "Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear." A disciple asked why he always said that. Jesus explained, "Everyone has ears, but not everyone has a ready heart. I speak to their ears in the hope that the sound will find its way into their hearts." 49. The prophet brings a fire and people are afraid of being burned. The word of truth is not a pleasant, cool breeze, it is a purifying fire. It burns away false pretenses, evil intentions, and self-satisfaction. Many people fear that fire. They would rather live in the coldness of their current state. Jesus told his disciples, "I have come to bring fire on the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled." They did not understand. He explained, "That fire is the truth of God. It burns the dry grass and straw to reveal the fertile ground. But those who have built their houses with dry grass will be afraid of this fire." 50. Rejection in the hometown is the final lesson in freedom. Ultimately, not being accepted by the ones you love most is a painful but necessary lesson in freedom. It frees the prophet from the bondage of pleasing others, from the need for worldly recognition. From then on, he seeks only the recognition of God and is completely free to carry out his mission. After all the rejection, Jesus went up on a mountain alone to pray. He did not ask the Father to change the hearts of the villagers. He only said, "Father, I thank you. For when all earthly doors close, I see even more clearly the open door of the kingdom of heaven. I no longer belong to Nazareth, so that I can belong completely to you." Before we continue with today's journey of discovery, we would greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to leave a comment and share your feelings. If you found this content valuable, please don't forget to hit the share button to spread these positive vibes to your friends and family. And now, let's get back to the program. 51. The greatest tragedy is not that the prophet is rejected, but that God's gift is left unopened. The prophet is sent as a loving gift from God to his own people. When they reject him, they not only insult the gift-bearer, but they leave the most precious gift right at their doorstep. The pain lies not in the gift being returned, but in the recipient having refused the blessing for themselves. Jesus saw a father give his son a precious scroll, but the child cried for a wooden toy instead. The father sadly put the scroll away. Jesus turned to his disciples and said, "The Father in heaven is the same. He gives this nation the bread of life, but they demand signs according to their own will. The tragedy is not that the bread is spurned, but that their hunger will never be satisfied." 52. The world's rejection is the crucible in which divine identity is forged. The identity given by the hometown is always limited. The carpenter's son. Their cruel rejection inadvertently becomes a grace, for it forces the prophet to shed that social identity, to fully embrace his true identity, the one that comes from God. Rejection becomes the crucible in which divine identity is forged. Peter tried to defend Jesus in front of others. "My teacher is a skilled carpenter. Jesus gently interrupted, "Peter, that is the clay jar. Do not be so busy describing the jar that you forget the treasure it contains. It is because they only see the jar that they have helped me realize that this treasure does not belong to the world." 53. The world demands proof, while God seeks trust. The people of Nazareth wanted proof, tangible miracles to satisfy their reason and curiosity. But the path of faith is not built on proof, it is woven with trust, especially when we do not understand everything. Their rejection was a failure in the test of faith. A man challenged, "If you truly come from God, make this stone turn into bread." Jesus replied, "A son who only obeys his father after demanding proof of his love is a hired hand. A son who obeys because he trusts in his father's love is truly a son. I have come to find sons, not hired hands." 54. The prophet reveals the hidden idols in people's hearts. People do not only worship idols of gold and silver, they worship invisible idols. The security of tradition, reputation in the village, the comfort of habit, the stability of the social order. The prophet's word directly threatens these idols, so they must destroy him to protect their gods. Jesus saw a man decorating his house lavishly for a festival. He said to the man, "Your house is beautiful, but would you be willing to tear down a beautiful wall if you knew it was hiding a poisonous snake?" The man was stunned. Jesus continued, "I have come to show you the snakes hiding behind the beautiful walls of tradition." 55. When they reject the familiar that has been sanctified, they become strangers to God himself. A bitter paradox. By clinging to the familiar image of Jesus from the past, they made themselves strangers to the work God was doing in their midst in the present. They embraced a memory and let a living reality slip away. Jesus told a parable. There was a river that flowed through a village. The villagers loved it. But one day the river changed its course to bring water to a drier land. Those who insisted on going to the old riverbed for water would only find it dry, and they would resent the river. Only those who bravely follow the new course will find life. 56. The pain of a bridge with no one to cross it. A prophet is like a bridge connecting heaven and earth. To be rejected by his own people is like being a sturdy, beautiful bridge built across an abyss, but no one is willing to cross it. The pain is not in being a bridge, but in the purpose of one's existence not being fulfilled. When they passed an old stone bridge covered in vines, Andrew said, "What a waste, such a good bridge that no one uses." Jesus stopped, looked at Andrew and said, "You have just spoken the heart of the Father in heaven. He gave his only Son as a bridge for humanity to return to him. But many would rather take the perilous detour or stand forever on this side of the bank. 57. They want a savior who fits their definition, not the savior they truly need. The people of Nazareth, like many others, expected a Messiah in their own image, a mighty king, a political revolutionary. They already had a mold. When Jesus came and did not fit that mold, they rejected him instead of realizing that it was their mold that needed to be broken. A person asked, "When will you free us from the yoke of Rome?" Jesus replied, "I have come to free you from a far more brutal yoke, the yoke of sin and death. What good is it for a man to be physically free if his soul is in chains?" 58. The prophet is the living memory of God among a forgetful people. Humans have a tendency to forget the covenants, promises, and great works of God. The prophet is sent as a living embodiment to remind them of all those things. His presence makes them uncomfortable because it forces them to remember what they want to forget. Jesus said, "You build tombs for the prophets of old and say, 'If we had lived in the days of our ancestors, we would not have done so.' But you are doing the exact same thing to the prophet who is among you. You love the dead reminders and kill the living ones." 59. Only emptiness can be filled. The people of Nazareth were too full with their own knowledge, with their religious self-satisfaction and their understanding of their fellow countryman Jesus. They had no empty space left in their souls for the wisdom of God to be poured in. Jesus held a jar full of sand and an empty jar. He tried to pour water into the jar with sand, and the water overflowed. Then he poured water into the empty jar and it filled up. He said, "My word is the same. It cannot enter a mind that is full of prejudice. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the empty in soul, for they will be filled by God." 60. God's power works in weakness, but the world worships only strength. Jesus did not come with armies, scepters, or palaces. He came in the humility of a carpenter. The world, accustomed to recognizing power only through its manifestations of strength, looked at that humility and considered it weakness and thus overlooked it. A Roman guard mocked a king with no soldiers? Jesus replied, "The strength of a seed is not in its size, but in the life potential within it. The power of the world can break rocks, but the power of God can make life sprout from within rocks." 61. The prophet is the answer to a question people have forgotten they ever asked. Deep in their souls, humans long for truth, meaning, and salvation. But daily life has made them forget these pressing questions. When the prophet comes with the answer, they feel it is foreign because they no longer even remember having the question. Jesus saw a man engrossed in counting his money and said to his disciples, "This man is trying to use these coins to fill a hole in his heart that only God can fill. He has been so busy that he has forgotten about the hole itself." 62. They reject because they cannot monopolize the message. If Jesus' message were exclusively for Nazareth, they might have embraced it as a source of local pride. But he spoke of a kingdom of heaven for everyone, for tax collectors and Gentiles alike. They could not accept a truth that did not belong to them alone, a savior they had to share with the whole world. A person said to Jesus, "If you are the Messiah of the Jews, why do you speak to Samaritans?" Jesus replied, "Does the sun rise only to shine on your field, or does it shine on the good and the evil alike? The love of God is just as vast." 63. The truth demands a price they are not willing to pay. Following Jesus requires giving up the ego. Forgiving enemies, loving the outcast, it is a very high price. Rejecting the messenger is the easiest way to avoid paying the price the message demands. A rich young man asked Jesus how to gain eternal life. After hearing the answer, he went away sad. Jesus watched him go and said, You want to follow me to the mountaintop to see the glory, but few are willing to carry their cross through the valley first. 64. The prophet is an anomaly that breaks the familiar rhythm. Life in a small village operates on repetitive rhythms: the planting season, the harvest season, the festivals. The prophet's appearance and teachings are an unusual event that disrupts that safe rhythm. People tend to eliminate the anomaly to return to the familiar rhythm. Jesus said, I have come like a strange note in a song you have sung 1,000 times. Some will recognize that the note makes the song more beautiful, but most will just want to erase it to return the song to how it was. 65. They want a teacher, not a redeemer. People could accept Jesus as a wise teacher, a rabbi with profound teachings, but he claimed to be the way, the truth, and the life, the Redeemer with the authority to forgive sins. This was beyond their limits. They were willing to learn, but not to be saved. Nicodemus came to Jesus at night and said, We know that you are a teacher who has come from God. Jesus replied, If you only see me as a teacher, you will only learn new things. But if you believe I am the one sent to give new life, then you yourself will be reborn. 66. Family love can become a barrier to messianic love. Family members, out of deep love and concern, can be the first to try to hinder the prophet's mission. Their love, though well-intentioned, is limited by a worldly framework, and they fear anything that might endanger their loved one. When his family came looking for Jesus, thinking he was out of his mind, he asked, Who is my mother? And who are my brothers? Then he pointed to his disciples and said, Here are my mother and my brothers, for whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother. This was not a renunciation, but a redefinition of a larger family in God's will. 67. They see the power but interpret it as demonic. When they cannot deny the extraordinary things the prophet does, and they also do not want to admit it is the power of God, people come to one final conclusion. It is the power of the devil. This is rejection at its deepest and most tragic level. When the scribes said Jesus cast out demons by the power of the prince of demons, he spoke of the sin against the Holy Spirit. Later, he sadly told his disciples, When a person calls light darkness, how deep is the darkness in their hearts? That is the worst kind of blindness. 68. The prophet does not redefine the past. He fulfills it. The people of Nazareth thought Jesus was trying to abolish what Moses and the prophets had said, but in reality he came to complete their words, to finish the picture that the ancient prophets had only sketched. They rejected him because they wanted to keep the familiar, unfinished picture. Jesus said on the mountain, Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. Later, he explained to his disciples, They are like people waiting for the last piece of a puzzle. But when I bring that piece, they say it doesn't look like the pieces they already have, and they throw it away. 69. To see the divine requires inner silence. The minds of the Nazareth villagers were too noisy with the voices of prejudice, gossip, and daily worries. The voice of God is a whisper, which can only be heard in the stillness of a humble and open soul. Jesus led his inner circle of disciples up a high mountain. In the stillness of the summit, he was transfigured. Afterward, he said, You can only hear my Father's voice in quiet places like this, both outside and within. Down in the village, the noise of the world has drowned everything out. 70. Rejection at home is the first and most difficult invitation to forgiveness. Jesus' mission was about love and forgiveness. Being brutally rejected by his closest acquaintances, the people he grew up with, became the first opportunity for him to live that message fully. His forgiveness did not begin on the cross, it began on the dusty roads of Nazareth. When the disciples were angry with the villagers, Jesus looked back at the receding village not with resentment, but with compassion. John asked, "Are you not angry with them, teacher?" Jesus replied, "Does a doctor get angry with a patient for not taking their medicine? He only feels sad for their illness." Our Father in heaven is the same. He never stops loving them. 71. Living truth cannot be categorized. The human mind likes to sort everything into familiar boxes. He is a carpenter, he is a fisherman, that is a tax collector. They want to put a label on the prophet so they can place him in a safe position within their system. But a living truth, a person carrying the Spirit, cannot be boxed in. The effort to categorize him is an act of rejecting his true nature. Jesus watched a spice merchant carefully portioning cinnamon and anise into identical jars. He said to his disciples, "This man can put spices in a jar, but can he put the wind that carries their fragrance into a jar? I have come with the wind of the Spirit, but they are just trying to find a jar to trap me in." 72. The prophet's freedom is seen as a betrayal. The prophet is a free person. He is free from the bonds of prejudice, from the fear of reputation, from the expectations of the community. But to those still living in those invisible chains, his freedom looks like a betrayal. If you are not bound by the same ropes as us, it means you are against us. A childhood friend reproached Jesus, "You have forgotten your roots, forgotten us." Jesus placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "A ship never forgets the harbor where it was built, but a ship is built to cross the sea, not to remain in the harbor. I have not forgotten you. I am just going where I was destined to go." 73. Inherited faith is always afraid of experiential faith. The faith of the people of Nazareth was an inherited faith. It was a cultural legacy, a set of rules and stories passed down. It was safe and predictable. But the prophet brings a faith that must be experienced directly. It is personal, challenging, and transformative. They rejected the encounter to protect their heritage. Jesus pointed to an old well and a new spring. He said, "People like to drink water from their ancestors' well because it is familiar, even if the water is stagnant. They are wary of the new spring because it flows swiftly and they don't know where it comes from. I am the spring of living water, but many still prefer the taste of stagnant tradition." 74. The wound of rejection opens a door to compassion. The pain of being misunderstood and abandoned by his own people does not make the prophet bitter. On the contrary, it deepens his heart, turning it into a refuge for all who have ever been forsaken. The wound does not create resentment, it creates a larger heart capable of healing others. John saw Jesus looking towards a Gentile village with eyes full of love. John did not understand why. Jesus said, "When the door of your own home is closed in your face, you begin to understand the hearts of all who are left out in the cold. The wound of Nazareth helps me love the whole world." 75. The act of knowing a person can be the highest form of blindness. The statement, "I know him well," was the very wall that blocked the people of Nazareth. Their knowing was a closed book, a story with a finished ending. True understanding requires humility, the admission that a person is always an infinite mystery. A scribe boasted that he knew every word of the law by heart. Jesus asked him, "Do you know the love letter by heart, or do you know the one who wrote it?" One can know every street in a city and still not know the king who rules it. 76. The prophet speaks of the ocean to those who only know the village well. The prophet's vision is as vast as the ocean, but the worldview of those in his hometown, though perhaps deep in its own way, is as narrow as a village well. They cannot grasp the scale of the message and consider it madness. When Jesus preached about the kingdom of heaven, a person asked, "But how will that fit with our traditions?" Jesus replied, "You are asking how to pour the entire ocean into your village well. The problem is not how to make the ocean fit the well. The problem is how to make the well a channel to the ocean. 77. Rejection is the price of carrying an uncompromising message. The world operates on compromise, but the truth of God is pure and cannot be diluted. The prophet cannot water down his message to please the crowd. Rejection is the inevitable reaction of a relative world when confronted with an absolute truth. The disciples advised Jesus, "Teacher, perhaps you should speak more tactfully so they are not shocked." Jesus replied, "You can dilute good wine to sell more, but it will lose its true flavor. I cannot dilute my Father's word. Those who are truly thirsty will seek the pure wine." 78. The prophet exposes the poverty hidden behind the appearance of prosperity. The village of Nazareth might have looked stable and materially prosperous, but the prophet, with his piercing gaze, saw the spiritual hunger and poverty hidden beneath. His words made them uncomfortable because they stripped away the facade of false prosperity they had worked so hard to build. Jesus said, "Many are like whitewashed tombs. They look clean and beautiful on the outside, but inside they are full of dry bones and death. I have not come to praise the whitewash, but to make those bones live again." 79. They want to keep a memory while he wants to bring a presence. To the people of Nazareth, Jesus was part of their memory, a fond memory of the village. They wanted to keep him in that memory box. But Jesus did not come as a memory. He came as a living, transforming presence of God, here and now. An elderly woman said to Jesus, "I still remember the well-behaved little boy, Jesus." Jesus smiled, "Madam, do you still keep the old clothes of that child? They no longer fit me. God is also doing a new thing. Do not try to clothe him in yesterday's garments." 80. The prophet's word has its own weight. People thought they had the right to judge and reject the prophet's word, but they did not realize that the word itself was judging them. Truth has its own weight, a spiritual gravity. When you reject it, it doesn't disappear. It is you who fall out of its orbit. Jesus said, "Therefore everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand." He did not say he would destroy their houses. He only said that their own choices would determine whether the house stood or fell. 81. The prophet is a divine interruption in a worldly schedule. Humans live by schedules: work, eat, sleep. That schedule provides a sense of control. The prophet comes as an unannounced interruption. He invites them to abandon their schedule to enter God's time, kairos. Rejection is the attempt to return to the safety of the old schedule. When Jesus called his disciples to leave their nets and follow him, a bystander said, "But it's fishing time." Jesus replied, "Yes, but it is also time to begin another much greater harvest. There are harvests that do not wait for man." 82. They fear a God who is near more than a God who is distant. A God who is high in the heavens, distant and non-interfering, is easy to accept. But a God who walks among them in the form of a carpenter they know, who eats at their table, is a frightening thing. That closeness erases all safe distances and forces them to confront holiness directly. Jesus said, "People like to look at a distant star and make a wish. But if that star fell into their garden, they would run away in fear. I am the star that has come near, but they just want me to stay in the sky." 83. The prophet is a living question, and not everyone wants to find the answer. The prophet's presence poses fundamental questions. Who are you? What do you live for? What is your ultimate purpose? Many people do not want to face these questions. They would rather live a life without questions than embark on a difficult journey to find answers. A man asked Jesus, "Teacher, what is the greatest commandment?" Instead of just answering, Jesus told a parable and asked back, "So who do you think was the neighbor?" He didn't just give the answer, he forced the person to find it for himself. Many walked away because they just wanted an easy answer. 84. Rejection stems from an inability to forgive oneself. Sometimes people cannot accept the holiness of others because it highlights their own shortcomings and faults. The prophet's message of love and forgiveness becomes unbearable for a soul that cannot forgive itself. A Pharisee who lived a life of strict discipline felt hatred when Jesus forgave the sinful woman. Jesus saw into his heart and said, "He who is forgiven much, loves much." Sometimes it is those who think they need no forgiveness who find it hardest to love, even themselves. 85. The prophet brings the new wine of joy, while they are accustomed to the old vinegar of duty. The religious life of many had become a series of dry duties like sour vinegar. The prophet comes and brings the new wine of the kingdom, a living relationship full of joy and freedom. But those accustomed to the taste of vinegar think the sweetness of the new wine is false. At the wedding at Cana, the master of the banquet was surprised that the good wine was served last. Jesus later explained to his disciples, "The law is plain water. The love of God turns water into fine wine. But many are so used to drinking water that they fear the intoxication of the wine of love." 86. They want a visible king, not an invisible kingdom. The human mind gravitates toward the concrete, the visible. They want a king on a throne, an army they can see. But the prophet speaks of a kingdom within people, a rule in the soul. They rejected the invisible to seek a fleeting visible power. People asked Jesus, "When is the kingdom of God coming?" He replied, "The kingdom of God does not come in a way that can be observed. For behold, the kingdom of God is in your midst." They looked around and saw nothing, and then they went away disappointed. They searched with their eyes, while the kingdom must be found with the heart. 87. The rejection is a prophecy of a greater rejection. The event in Nazareth was not an isolated incident. It was a microcosm, a foreshadowing of what would happen in Jerusalem. It was the first chapter of a tragic story of the world rejecting its own creator. Upon leaving Nazareth, Jesus said to his disciple, "Foxes have dens and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head." This was not just about physical lack. It was about a profound spiritual homelessness that began in his own hometown. 88. The prophet has a different inner rhythm than the world. The world operates on the rhythm of haste, ambition, and anxiety. The prophet lives by the rhythm of prayer, of listening, and of trust in divine providence. These two rhythms are too different, and those dancing to the world's tune will find the prophet's steps awkward and incomprehensible. Martha was busy and worried about many things while Mary sat at the Lord's feet. Jesus told Martha, "Only one thing is needed." The rejection in Nazareth was the same. They were too busy with the many things of life to notice the one thing needed right in front of them. 89. The truth will set you free, but first it will make you miserable. Truth has the power to liberate. But before it liberates, it often exposes the chains we wear, the illusions we cling to. This process is very painful. Many would rather live in familiar slavery than endure the temporary misery of facing the truth. Jesus said, "The truth will set you free." Those who heard him replied, "We are Abraham's descendants and have never been slaves to anyone." They rejected freedom because they didn't even realize they were imprisoned. 90. Human rejection cannot thwart God's plan. This is the final and most hopeful philosophy. Even if humans reject, even if they close every door, God's loving plan still finds a way to be fulfilled. The rejection in Nazareth did not end Jesus' mission. On the contrary, it pushed him out into the wider world. Human failure became part of God's victory. After being rejected, Jesus went to other villages to preach. He told his disciples, The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Never be discouraged by human rejection, for my Father's hand can write straight on the crooked lines they have drawn. 91. The prophet is a mirror to the soul's thirst. The prophet's presence not only brings answers, but also awakens thirsts that people didn't know they had. A thirst for meaning, for truth, for something greater. To reject him is an attempt to convince oneself that one's soul is not thirsty, that the village well is more than enough. Jesus saw a traveler with parched lips refuse a glass of water, insisting he wasn't thirsty. He said to his disciples, "The souls of many are just like that. They are dying of thirst for the word of God, but the tongue of pride keeps insisting, 'I have no need.'" 92. God's love is not diminished by human rejection. Human love is conditional. It often withdraws when spurned. But God's love is unconditional and persistent. The sun does not stop shining on a village just because its inhabitants close all their doors. The rejection in Nazareth did not diminish God's love. On the contrary, it showed how great and patient that love is. Peter said angrily, "They are not worthy of you, teacher." Jesus replied gently, "Peter, does a father stop loving his child just because, in a fit of anger, the child says he hates him? My Father's love is not a reaction, it is an eternal state." 93. Rejection exposes the tragic grandeur of free will. Why doesn't an all-powerful God force them to believe? The rejection in Nazareth is the answer. It is a painful testament to how much God respects human freedom. He gives them the freedom to love, and with it comes the freedom to say no, even to himself. A potter made a beautiful pot, but it was flawed. He could have smashed it immediately. But instead, he set it aside, waiting. Jesus saw this and said, "My Father is the same. He could use his power to fix every mistake, but he chooses to wait in love because he wants the pot to realize for itself the value of being healed." 94. The shadow of the cross was first cast in his hometown. There is a deep spiritual connection between the wood in the Nazareth workshop and the wood of the cross on Golgotha. The rejection by his own kin was the first nail, the first experience of the ultimate abandonment he would have to endure. Nazareth was a passion in miniature. As they left Nazareth, Jesus stopped and looked silently back at the village. He raised his hand and looked at his palm. John, the beloved disciple, saw in his teacher's eyes a profound sadness, a premonition of another kind of wood and another kind of pain. 95. To see the prophet, one must see with the eyes of God. Human eyes see only a carpenter. The eyes of faith, eyes illuminated by grace, see the Son of God. True sight is not an act of human intellect, but a gift of revelation. The people of Nazareth failed to ask for that gift. The blind man Bartimaeus, sitting by the roadside, saw Jesus more clearly than all the sighted people in the city. Jesus said, "Many have perfect eyes but see only mud. Others are physically blind but see the path to the kingdom of heaven. For seeing is not an act of the pupils but of the soul." 96. The loneliness of the prophet is a share in the loneliness of God. God in his essence is an eternal invitation of love to a world that often ignores it. In the rejection he endures, the prophet tastes a small part of that divine loneliness, the eternal anguish of unrequited love. One night in prayer on a mountain, the disciples heard Jesus whisper, "Father, now I understand a little of how you feel." That simple statement contained a deep empathy between the Son and his Father, a sharing in God's own sorrow at being rejected by mankind. 97. Rejection creates a periphery where the true church is born. By casting out the prophet, the village defined its own boundaries. But paradoxically, the true community of faith began to form precisely outside the city gates. among the outcasts, the seekers, and those who dared to leave the familiar to follow the call of truth. A leper who was not allowed in the village was the first to welcome Jesus as he left Nazareth. Jesus turned to his disciples and said, "Remember this, the kingdom of God often begins where the kingdoms of men end." 98. Leaving the earthly hometown to begin the journey to the heavenly homeland. The door of the earthly home in Nazareth closed, but that very act opened a greater path, the journey of the Son returning to the Father's house. The rejection made it clearer where the prophet's true destination lay. Jesus looked up at the sky and said, "A traveler may be sad when a roadside inn turns him away. But that sadness fades when he remembers he is on his way to his true home, where his Father is waiting." 99. Rejection is loud, but grace is a whisper more persistent than any noise. The no of the crowd is like a deafening roar, but God's yes in the soul is a patient whisper. The prophet teaches us that the quiet whisper of grace is ultimately stronger and more enduring than any roar of rejection. In the midst of a noisy market, Jesus showed his disciples a tiny seed sprouting from a crack in a stone. He said, "The noise of 1,000 passing feet cannot stop this seed from hearing the call of the Son. The grace of God is just like that." 100. Rejection is never the final word. This is the ultimate philosophy, the greatest hope. The story does not end in the dust of Nazareth. It ends at the empty tomb in Jerusalem. Rejection is a painful and necessary chapter, but it is not the last chapter of the book. The final word is always love, resurrection, and salvation. Human rejection can close one door, but it can never stop God from opening another, greater one. Years later, Mary Magdalene sat with the apostles and recalled that day in Nazareth. She said, "Back then we thought it was the deepest wound, but now we know that no rejection, not even the rejection of the cross, can be stronger than the teacher's love." The empty tomb is God's final answer to Nazareth and to all humanity. So we have concluded a long and profound journey, passing through 100 perspectives, 100 reflections inspired by a seemingly simple teaching of Jesus. No prophet is honored in his own hometown. From that one seed of truth, we have seen a forest of wisdom grow. We realize that the story of Nazareth long ago is not just Jesus' story, but the story of each of our souls. In our lives, haven't we too been like the villagers of Nazareth, missing the sacred in our loved ones because of overfamiliarity? Haven't we used the prejudices of the past to close the mysterious door of the present? And perhaps there have been times when we felt like a lonely prophet in our own hometown, in our family, at work, in our community, carrying a truth, a beautiful dream that was not understood. The Lord's teaching is not to condemn, but to invite, an invitation to look deeper, listen more closely, and love more openly, an invitation to bravely overcome the walls of familiarity to touch eternal values. This journey of contemplation will only be truly complete with your own sharing. Which philosophy touched your heart the most? Please leave a comment below so that we can build a community of listening and understanding together. If this series has brought you moments of peace and reflection, please give Jesus and me a like. And do not hesitate to share this journey with souls who need to be heard and healed. And if you are not yet a member of the Jesus and Me family, please press the subscribe button and the bell icon next to it so we don't miss the next meaningful spiritual journeys. Jesus and Me sincerely thanks you for your precious companionship throughout this series. May the peace and wisdom of God always be with you, helping you to recognize the sacred in the most ordinary things of life. Jesus and Me bids you farewell and looks forward to seeing you in future programs.